Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. We have in the house a very great personality who is going to show us a lot of stuff. I like today's topic. It's kind of David and Goliath kind of thing, small competing with the mighty stuff. So, the topic for today is how to build a good software company to compete with big companies, big tech companies. So, in today's podcast, we have with us Jon Holttum, CEO and founder at Fissara, who we are going to have a chat with. Okay, so we're going to start, and I'll let Jon talk to us. But before that, my name is Bernard. Data Pandas, we hold this podcast to bring you industry insight and let you know what's happening and get to know some of the brilliant companies out there that are doing amazing stuff for the users, for the community, and for everyone at large. Make sure you subscribe, put your comments in the chat box, ask any questions that you have with Fizarra, and definitely they will come back to look at the questions and answer you if you have anything. So I'll let Jon take the stage and introduce himself and what Fizarra is about. Hello, Jon.
Hi, morning.
Yeah, so can you tell me about who Jon Holttum is and what Fizarra is about?
Yeah, I've been in software for probably 30 odd years. Set up my own business in 2000 and still running a software company in a slightly different way than it was originally intended. Yeah, that's what we do. Fizarra is a sort of a workforce management expert, and we develop software platforms for mobile workers, as in sort of field engineers, nickel people working at other customer sites. And we also have a platform for waste management, which is used predominantly by haulage businesses who are operating fleets of vehicles. So that's roughly what we are.
So Fizarra is more like a B2B kind of tech.
Yeah, it's all B2B. We don't have any consumer customers at all.
Okay, great. I know in the space that you work in, there are a lot of big companies in quote out there. So how do you what do you think when you think about competing with these big software companies? What do you believe is genuinely hard? What do you believe is genuinely hard, and what do people overestimate?
I think that the hard part is people having confidence in you or confidence in your reputation, and actually getting in front of people is really important. So I think when you're competing on a face to face level with larger companies, it's about personality, it's about trust, and it's about people understanding your capabilities as a business, irrespective of your size, and how you respond sort of professionally to challenges and difficult situations. I think that's once you're in front of people and you gain that kind of trust, you're on a level playing field. But getting people's attention, especially in larger businesses, is quite difficult, as they will generally opt for a business that they've heard of, that they've seen online, or another company of their size is currently using. So that's the struggle, getting in front of them. Once you're in front, it becomes a lot easier. And what do people overestimate? I think the overestimation may be, as an example, because you've got what you believe to be the best software and the best solution at the best price, doesn't necessarily mean that the people buying from you or trying to buy from you are going to go with your solution. And a lot of people think if you build it, they'll buy it, and that's not necessarily true. So that's a thing that you need to be aware of.
Wow, that's quite insightful. So getting in front of the people, and it's not only just getting in front of the people, but building that personality and trust
Yes.
so that they actually buy into what you have to offer them.
Yes.
How do you build that personality and trust?
What we've done over the years is try to get our brand and our culture, I think, is a really good thing, out into the ether. In effect, we do a lot of content on LinkedIn, and we've very recently adopted a very much SEO driven approach to drive inbound inquiries, as opposed to trying to make outbound contacts with people. And I think the trust element is certainly in industries that we work in, they all talk to each other. And if one company is using our software, that you're 50% of the way there. If you're going in cold where they've not heard of you, it's a lot harder to do. But I think, as I said, about being faced with people, you need to be yourself, you need to be genuine, and you need to be honest. Certainly in the waste industry, you can't turn up in a shiny suit and tell stories about how great you are. You've got to prove it. You've got to be there and respond accordingly when you're questioned. Overall, just be yourself. Don't put on an act. Just be who you are, explain what you do and why you do it, and be enthusiastic. I think that's it.
So for people trying to build companies from start to compete globally, you have to be yourself and just be enthusiastic about the product.
I think also, and we've spoken about this before, Bernard. I think a lot of tech businesses make the mistake of employing salespeople, all sorts of people at the front end. Your best salespeople are your product owners, the people that actually know the products best. They will sell the system for you based on their experience and pretty much the benefits of using the system, as opposed to salespeople. It's very hard to train people on a complex software product. If you put the right people in front of the people making the decisions, then there's an awful lot of trust involved in that as well.
Yeah, I remember that. And I think that that's a very key insight for us. So you
Yeah.
also mentioned that once you are in front of the people, your customers, you are speaking to them, now there's a level playing field with
Yeah.
the big companies. So where do big companies tend to win and where are they most beatable?
I think they tend to win, and we've experienced this a lot. They tend to win when probably the potential customer, it puts out a tender or an RFI or an RFQ, and I think as a small business, you can spend an awful lot of time responding to a tender. The risk of spending all of that time compared to your chances of winning are, it's very low. And I would suggest, unless it's an absolute perfect fit for your business, then concentrate on getting inbound inquiries rather than responding to tenders, because it will soak up so much of your team's time. As I say, the chances of winning are pretty slim. And that's where larger companies tend to win, because they've got the team, they've got the all of the component parts that are required to respond to a tender and adjust themselves. And the other thing as well with that, it's a very sort of detached process, whereby the people that you're selling to, you don't actually know. You've never met them, you've never seen their face, and you've never, for want of a better word, looked in the whites of their eyes. So you can't really see the emotion in a tender. And our larger competitors can win in that situation because they've got the brochure, where they've got the documentation, everything that's needed to support a tender. And the other part of the question, where are they most beatable? It's face to face. On the battlefield is exactly what I said before. If you can get a meeting with the decision makers and get in front of those people, you're pretty much in a good chance. Have a good chance of them becoming a customer. And at that point, the decision is then around, can I work with these people, and are they offering a solution that's going to meet my requirements? And that's a much better way for in my opinion, for customers to buy software. Just because it's got a big corporate badge on it doesn't mean it's the best. And generally, a lot of those systems as well are old, antiquated, and they're not reactive like a small business can be. So our products tend to shine, as far as, if you can demonstrate them, the fact that they're more modern, they're quicker, they're easier to use, you've got a much better chance. So that's where we compete. We compete on the sort of face-to-face inbound inquiries, where we can get in front of people and convince them that we've got the best offering. So yeah.
Insightful. So you mentioned your best salespeople are your product owners who know the product a lot, who can
Yeah.
talk about it. And then when you're able to get in front of these decision makers, then you can actually level the playing field. Because then if you go on the tender side, you are going to stress your team or stretch them where you don't have enough manpower compared to the big tech companies.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite insightful. So how do you pick a market and a wedge that gives you a real chance instead of competing head on?
I think when we started in workforce management, there wasn't anything that was, and we'll talk about that first, there wasn't really anything that was broad enough to meet the requirements for the companies that we were looking at, so telecoms, businesses, and utilities. They generally still did everything on spreadsheets. They did everything on paper. Very, very little visibility of what was going on outside of the office. And it was only either word of mouth or paperwork that was coming back to you. And that's really slow. And there were other companies, software businesses in that market sector. Generally, they tended to be American businesses. And the way that American businesses work are, quite different from the way companies work in the UK. So there was a the thing that we look for is it heavily paper driven? Is it a situation once 80% of your workforce is acting on your behalf outside of an office, disconnected from laptops and networks and everything else? And in that respect, that's how we choose our market. When it comes to the waste side of things, that was exactly, an exact replica of that. There were software companies there already. Some of them have been around for an awful long time. And that the systems were either not modern, or people were generally, still using paper spreadsheets. And, it's certainly in the sort of fleet environment, there's a lot of bits of paper that the driver has to get signed and fill in. Um, and a lot of that as well, a lot of that information that is done is repetitive. So it's the same information being written down once, twice, 10, 15 times a day. Now, if you can introduce software that actually captures that and, saves all that paperwork and makes the job easy for the people that don't really want to be using technology, they want to be getting on with their job, then that's a good market to go for. So that's how we look at things. If there's a gap because people are still doing things on paper or on spreadsheets or old antiquated technology, then you can modernize that really easily. Especially if you've got 80% of your workforce are out in vehicles and in muddy fields and things. It's that's what we look for.
Wow, it's very insightful. So you did mention, like, whilst you're talking, you did mention two products. Like, talk about waste and you talk about employees, engineers, and stuff. So I think maybe we didn't get into that really well from the beginning for the listener, for us to understand where and the scope or the product that Fizarra has. So talk to me. Let's go back a step back. Talk to me about what kind of products does Fizarra actually currently have? Because it looks like you are competing from the lean angle against the top companies. But how many products do you have on the market, and what do they do exactly?
Yeah, we've got two main products. Manage is our engineering focused platform. The idea behind it is from the point that you building a project as a customer, building a project for one of your customers. So let's imagine a civil engineering project you're doing for a customer. The system allows you to actually basically convert the document or the project into a selection of elements, and that the platform will handle that. So it will do things like scheduling the engineer's work. It will look at qualifications and certifications of your engineers to make sure they're qualified to do the work. And it will also record the amount of time you're spending doing that activity, what the outcome is, and everything is fully documented and everything's fully digital at the end of the day. So from the start of a project right the way through to the completion of the project, you've got an operational record of everything that's happened, all of the timings of things. You can gain sign off images. So you've really got a great picture of what the project was and what you did to complete that project. And it's used for operations and maintenance. It's used for installation work, and more people require that information as a customer of our customers to sort of qualify the fact that they're getting a value for money, and B, everything's been done in a compliant way. So that's what Manage does, and the nice thing about it is it's highly configurable. And it's not configurable by us. That's the beauty of what we do. It allows people to change their processes, change what they want the system to do for them, and change the inputs and outputs without having to go back to a developer. And that's where that product works really, really well. It's highly flexible. From a waste point of view, it's a bit more linear. However, it is designed as a sales tool in the first instance. So your sales team can actually sell products and services to your customers. Once that sale is approved, that will then convert that into a job, i.e. a haulage job, to deliver some kind of material. And then your driver will complete the information that's required. And a lot of there's a lot of mandatory requirements in the waste and haulage industry, and all of that is then being collected by the driver. Most of it without their knowledge. A lot of it is just adding a little bit of detail, but the end result is accumulation of everything that you know about that job prior to the job being created. So the end of that, you end up with all the legal compliant documentation, and the system also will invoice the customer for the work. So that's a full end-to-end operational commercial tool for the waste industry and the haulage industry. And it works really, really well. It's a bit more structured as far as the processes are concerned, but it still has an awful lot of flexibility to it and a lot of configurations. That works very, very well as well. And on top of that, we are constantly modernizing the way things work, the way things look, and how they operate. So it's a challenge, but it's good fun. It's a nice market to be in.
Brilliant. That makes me understand the earlier point that you made, like, making sure you save the workers or people a lot of time. If their workforce, about 80% of the workforce is out there doing what they're doing, then it's a good time to actually make things easier for them. If things are more spreadsheet in the ways that the mobile workforce product that you have, I think that is where it makes me understand what the point that you're making earlier on. Okay, so how do you decide who you are for? I know you are in the waste, you're also in the mobile workforce management and stuff, but how do you decide that who you are for, and just as importantly, who you are not for? Do you just take anyone in the way? Do you take any company at all, or how do you decide that?
Obviously, there's a cost to operating the platforms. Both the platforms are sitting on Amazon, if I can say Amazon. There are other cloud-based platforms available, but we chose Amazon. And there is a cost associated with that, and but we do make sure that we're constantly monitoring the cost of that, and therefore there's a minimum amount of revenue we need from a customer. But that said, if we've got someone who's very, very keen and they're fairly low maintenance, we've got customers that run 3 or 4 trucks in the waste industry and still use the system, and they're happy with it, and it adds benefit for the amount they pay for it. In reality, our sweet spot is companies that maybe have, in the waste industry, it's very easy to sort of qualify that. They maybe have, sort of 40 odd vehicles, and they've probably got 10 people in the back office managing and the administration and everything else. And that's a good place for us. The larger organizations, the fleets that are running 200, 300 vehicles, they're generally a lot very complex. And our system is very geared around simplifying operational processes and the commercials around, relatively smaller businesses. So that's how we identify who we want to work with. We also, the thing that you should always do as a software company, whenever you're engaging with someone, check on Companies House, check the structure of the business, check their profitability, check their turnover, and if you've got the opportunities, check their credit rating, because there's no point trying to sell your product to somebody that's not going to pay you. And that's really, really important. Yeah, that's how we go about it. There's a vast market in the waste industry because they're very, I wouldn't say necessarily backward, but a lot of the businesses there still operate in paper. They still do things how they've done them for the last 50 odd years. But legislation is making and the mandatory requirements is making, it is actually happening this year in October, that everybody in the waste industry has to be digital. So you have to produce digital evidence of the waste you're moving. And therefore that's a good place for us to start. But, we want easy companies to work with, nice people. And that as actually is a factor. We will engage with people and think, not really sure we want to work with them. Not we're in a position where we can choose our customers. But if we had the choice, we work with nice people that we can get along with rather than people that are going to cause us a headache and be difficult. I shouldn't necessarily say that, but if you got the chance to do it, pick your customers if you can. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, okay, so that ties back to when you said, like, you have the chance to speak to your customer, then you actually get to know them, the level playing field is there, and then they also get to know you better, and then from there on it's a level playing field. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the thing that I notice with what we do is, I've worked for companies in the past where larger organizations where you'd say, okay, we've got a customer, but they want to speak to one of our other customers. And there'll be lots of scratching of heads and, oh, should we ask these people? Should we ask those people? And you would end up always having a customer reference as one particular customer because you've got a good relationship with them. I think where we're at, and which is a great thing, is I've got no qualms at all, no problem at all of referring any of our potential customers to any of our existing customers. They're all, we work with them really well. And if they had any bad things to say about us, they would have told us. So it's really important to make sure you maintain that relationship and you react, accordingly when they've got an issue, when they've got a problem. At the end of the day, they're using your technology to run their business to make money. So you have to be aware of that. That's really, really important. And if they've got a problem with it, then it's the most important thing in the world. That's for them. And therefore it's the most important thing in the world for us. So yeah.
Wow. I like that statement that you said that no qualms at all referring any of your customers. I mean, getting reference from any of your customers to prospective clients. That's quite powerful. Okay. So what makes a product feel 10 times better than a big competitor? What are the few things that truly matter?
The thing is, people are so used to applications now, whether you're running a business or you're on your phone, you're using an app. There was a time not that long ago where people said, well, I can get an app to do that. I can download an app. And people see apps as free. They see them as, to a penny. You can get an app for anything. And that, they just magically appear. But there's somebody who's actually sat thought about that. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that your solution, your application, if whether it's on a mobile or on a desktop, is actually really easy to use and intuitive. That's so important. We one of our mantras is that you're only ever one click away from the information you need, and you've got to make it visually appealing. There's nothing worse than sitting in front of Excel and running your business. What you want is something that actually looks good. The user interface is modern. Is keeping pace with what people see on their phones, and that's really, really important. Although the other thing is behind all of that, you've got this really sophisticated machine that is, state of the art, using all of the technologies that are advanced and new and shiny, and it makes the thing absolutely fly. So visualizing it and doing a demonstration in front of people is key. You're always going to get people say, well, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. But we generally soak that up and say, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's take that away. If this is going to make a difference for you, to becoming our customer, we'll develop it. And generally, we're at that point with both platforms where we think we've got 95% of everyone's functionality covered. So we know we're going to have to do it at some point, but it's a never-ending thing. It's like you're never going to finish the product. There's always going to be new things that need to come along and be added to the platform. But yeah, make it look good, make it fast, make it appealing, make it easy to use. That's the rules.
Make it fast, make it easy, make it appealing, make it simple to use. How do you then turn messy real world workflows into software that feels simple?
As I said earlier, a lot of the companies that we work with, there's a lot of repetitive information. So if you're capturing information, especially if you're doing it on paper, there is no way of avoiding writing something down twice. And in some cases, if it's the name of your company, you might be writing that down 10, 20 times a day. But if you know that, if you know the workflow and you understand what needs to be added at what stage, just make sure that you can, if you like, automate all those repetitive functions that are rarely going to change, that are already there in the background, so you don't have to add them in. It's the way of the world now. Most applications will tell you your location. So you don't have to ask someone to capture their location. Let the system do that for you. And it's hiding the complexity, hiding the sort of the mundane, repetitive stuff, and just the important information that makes that piece of data different from the last piece of data you added in. So yeah, that's key. Absolutely.
Okay. So you did mention that I mean, you are at a stage where about 90 to 95% of your functionality that your clients really request, you have them covered. And then you also mentioned that you have to listen to the clients and then obviously help build products if they make them happy. My question for you is, what's your approach to customer requests? How do you avoid building a bloated, kind of Frankenstein or
Yeah, that is a challenge. It is a challenge. What I think you've got to do is set people's expectations of what the system is for. What it's there to do, and what benefit that will give you. We get situations. Well, can it do this? Can it create that? Well, that really sits outside the remit of the system. So sometimes you have to say no. We're not going to do that. There are other ways of doing that outside of the system, which is fine. But as far as requests for new functionality concerned, if they're enhancements to what we currently have, we have a backlog, and we're constantly juggling that backlog to prioritize it. That might mean we've got a priority because if we don't do this, we're not going to win this new business. It might be a priority because it's an existing customer and it's causing them a headache. So that topic of prioritization, what we're going to do from a development point of view and what's going to get released, happens every day. And that's important. As a team, you've got to communicate, who's pushing the hardest, why should we do this? Is it a benefit to the platform generally? And is it going to benefit everybody? And that's another key thing. We always use the term community software. We build something, and if we get some help financially to build that from a client or from a new opportunity, great. Are they made aware right at the start? If we build that, everybody gets it. And sometimes there's some eyebrows raised, well, hang on a minute, we're paying for it, but everyone gets the benefit. Yes, but it works in reverse. So if somebody comes to us with a different requirement will actually benefit you, you'll get that for free. So all of the upgrades and paid for functionality that get put into the platforms are released to everyone. And that has made us different because a lot of companies will charge for that. So, oh, hang on a minute, that's an extra. Why don't we monetize it? Well, we don't do that. If it's core functionality that's being improved or additions to the core functionality, it's just how it is tomorrow. So, we've got customers that started using our platforms 10 years ago, and the way the system works now and what it does now on top of what it originally did is vastly different. And you don't really get that in any other industry apart from software. If you buy a car, it's exactly the same car you bought on that day. And in 10 years' time, it's exactly the same car you bought 10 years ago. With software, it's a very different thing. And I like that. I like the fact that it does change and it evolves and people actually get stuff and they perceive it to be get stuff for nothing. So, yeah, sorry, Bernard, I've forgotten what your original question is, but I just thought that's an
no,
interesting thing to cover.
I think you covered most of the stuff that I wanted to hear. Well, I was in regards to the question that I asked. But you you seem to be reactive, like responding to your customer requests, not helping satisfy most of these customers and stuff. When people are trying to build, I mean, I think our audience are gonna, like this question, particularly those that are trying to build a lean company. So do you have some principle, like product principles that help, build a lean team, and also build quality software consistently, or you just go about with just responding to requests that meet the customer needs?
Yeah, we've got processes and we've got a culture. We've got a great culture in the business, and it's not. I don't say that because everybody talks about culture and company culture, but the reality is I've sort of ensured that everybody knows everything as much as possible about what everybody else does. So that they can step in, they can understand the pressures that one person is under, and say, "Actually, is there anything I can take from you? Is there any? I've got less on my plate today. Can I take anything from you?" And that works really, really well. So, the fact is that we can react very, very quickly because, for example, I might want to be designing the front end to a new piece of functionality. And if I can't do it, I know I can hand it over to somebody else. So we're a lean team, but we've all got capabilities in most areas. Obviously, with respect, I can't develop software and I'm not a DevOps and I'm not a back end architecture engineer, but I understand it enough to know when something needs to be changed. And I understand it enough to be able to discuss that with the people that are doing things. And I think you've got to give people the sort of authority and automation to make decisions on their own and react on their own. But we're a distributed business. We work in different parts of the country and in certain respects, different parts of the world, but we communicate all the time. It's either a video call and we'll do a quick drop-in video call for 5 minutes, or we use Slack, heavy users of Slack. And I think a second part of the answer there as well is how can we react quickly? Where we've adopted the same principles of the software that we create with our own business. So we use as much technology as possible to take away the duplication and the mundane. So as an example, we're setting up a little tool where I could start a new environment for a company. They could say, yes, we're going to sign up. Rather than me having to bother my CTO or one of his team with it, I can do it myself. Okay, then you could think, actually, well, really, do you want that to be happening? But we all know what's going on. And if you've got the capability to do that yourself, do it. Takes 5 minutes. We can spin up a new environment for a customer in 30 seconds. So, but use as much automation, as much process, and as much modern technology as possible to take away the difficult, the constant mundane tasks away from people and let them focus on the exciting things. So, yeah, and it's a lot cheaper than hiring people. You buy an AI tool for $180 a year and you've saved yourself $3,000. It's that simple.
Wow.
Well, $3,000 a month, the price to developers these days.
Well, thanks on the right side. But I think that's one of the things that stuck with me when we first had a chat, like trying to automate most of the tasks as much as possible and then take the pressure off your developers. So you'd mentioned, trust when you get inside in front of the customer, and then you have a talk with them, you get a trust, you react to their requests quickly, you provide, upgrades and things that, help them achieve what they're doing. And you also mentioned that you've got a point where most of your, team, like each one knows a bit of what everyone does so that, they can always, chip in where needed. So the trust side is there. You spoke to the customer. Now you are building products and stuff. What are the few technical disciplines that you consider non-negotiable to earn trust on the technical side of things? So is it like monitoring, incident response, backup, security? What are the things technical wise?
I think all of those to varying degrees. We're quite fortunate that we have, a pure genius who works for us, and say it all the time that he does the DevOps work. He does, he acts as a CTO, he's head of development. He develops stuff. He creates apps. He's the one who's suggesting all the different AI tools to help the business operate. So going back to that, the security and scalability of the platform, and we have a federated logon for the platform. So you arrive at one place, and then depending on who you are, that's the database that you're looking at as a user. Now that architecture took some thinking about. So, and also, is it scalable? Is it resilient? Does it, if it ever went down, what happens? And I can leave that to that guy. So from a security point of view, I'm trusting him, but I know he's doing a fantastic job. But that's really, really important. I think that the most important thing people underestimate is dealing with your customers. Pay attention, respond quickly. Even if it's a difficult question, don't ignore it. Just say, "Great, we'll have a think about that." Give them an answer back. Or if you can, use a tool to do that. Automate the responses, but not too much AI. Make it personable. Don't make it, stock emails or stock text messages. Make it more friendly. People, when you're dealing with people, they just want to know that they're being heard. And if they've sent you an email, you've got to make sure you go back. So for me, responding to customers, which in any which way, is probably priority number one. And also, I think you've got to make sure that all of your team have the ability to speak to all people at all levels and understand, the difference between a customer who's a driver and a customer who's an FD. And, be accepting of the fact, and I hate the expression the customer's always right, but that's not necessarily true. But the customer always needs to be listened to and treated accordingly. And that is non-negotiable for me. And I think the thing that I thought about when you put this question to me previously was you don't need to hire People that have got a CV as long as they're, in my opinion, in a technical business that has got CV as long as they're on, they can do this, 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 and this. You've got to hire people that have capability and enthusiasm and have the right approach to dealing with other humans. That is probably the thing that I look for the most. So when I look at someone's CV, I'll go right to the bottom and see what they do for their hobbies. I play football. Okay, you're a team player. Good. I like listening to music. Okay, you can be creative. I paint things. Great. Those things to me are much more important to define what sort of person is going to come and work for the company, as opposed to the fact they've got a degree in, computer science. Now, and okay, you might think, well, that's a bit silly, but the technology side of things we can teach. The way that we operate, we can teach. But unless that person will fit in with our team, fit in with our culture and become what we, in inverted commas, call a Fizarrian, then it's not going to work for us. They won't enjoy themselves and we won't enjoy having them working for us. So, pick your people that can deal with other humans on a human level and understand and be empathetic. That's an absolute must. And that is a non-negotiable in my opinion.
Wow. You know what? And earlier on, I was holding on. I didn't want to ask this question. When he started talking about culture, 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 and I didn't want to ask about what's the culture like. But talking to you, like it seems like communication at all levels, like you mentioned, like all the way, like you should make all the members of your team be able to communicate with anyone in
Yeah.
any position in the company. And you talk about listening to your customers. You talk about even when bringing people in, you don't really look at the technical side. You look at the other things that are not easily teachable. The personality of the person, like to their hobbies. And I
Yeah.
think that's quite key. And you also mentioned about your excellent guy, this guy that can do everything. So that actually let me understand the culture that you've been talking about. And I think it's just a comment that I was trying to make. I think it's quite good. And I think it's something that I think our listeners will like a lot, like having that kind of culture, about most of these technical things. Even though it's a technical podcast, a technical audience, I believe this is a very key point that you stated. Thank you for that. So let's make it a bit practical, more practical as well. Let's say Fizarra talks about simplicity. So what does it look like? Okay, I know you've talked a little bit or more about it, but how does it look like in a practice where operations are very, very complex? How, even though the software is complex, how does simplicity come in there?
How do we make it look easy?
Correct.
Yeah. Think you've got to think of the disciplines that you're selling to, what's important to them. And you've always got stakeholders, in any size of business. You've got somebody who looks after the accounts, you got somebody who looks after, the logistics of things, you've got somebody who looks after planning all the work, and you've got obviously the people out in the field. People out in the field are very good at what they do. They're very good at driving lorries, they're very good at, tuning radio equipment or telecoms equipment, scaling, the amount of concrete that's required to make a bridge, for example. I'm simplifying it. What they don't want to be doing is being bogged down with a very, very, long-winded process on an app that, they have to spend time on. If they wanted to do that, they could do it on a laptop when they're back at their home or back at the office. What you need to do is look at what they do and make that as simple and as guided as possible. For a vehicle driver, a lorry driver, for example, they just want to get on and get their work done. And the least amount of steps they have to do to do that is key. And so that you're sort of channeling them down a route where they get to the point where they're hitting the complete button. And that's all you need. And you need to do that is a few steps as possible, make really, really simple, because they don't want to be focusing on staring at their phone or staring at a tablet. And, that's something they have to do for the job. They realize that, but that's not what they do for their job. And then you've got to look at the other end of the spectrum. So you look at somebody who's a finance director for a business. They'll want to know, what's my profit and loss? How much money is this vehicle making for me? How much are my supplies costing me? What's my return on investment in buying a new vehicle and those kind of things. So you then have to tune the system in such a way that it looks simple for everyone, but the finance guy can go in and get at that detail if he needs to. Make it as visual as possible. Our Move platform, for example, it shows a daily P&L. So as you book jobs for your lorries, you've got a contribution for each vehicle. So you're saying, actually, this vehicle needs to make me this amount of money today. And that's all of that collective information that sits in the background gives you that number. So the more work you give to that lorry, the more money you're going to make. And he can see it happening. So make it dynamic, make things appear in front of people that are good. We've recently introduced in Move tiles. So we have these smart tiles, and they actually show dynamic information as it happens. How long have I got before all the invoices are going to get sent? And there's a counter that clocks down. Make it more dashboardy. Don't make it like, don't try and replicate a spreadsheet. Make it visually appealing, as I've said before, but also make it so that the right people can get at the information they need to see really, really quickly. So you've got to think about your whole user base within a business and make each area that they're going to look at as simple and beneficial to them as possible. So, yeah.
Wow. So it's not like everybody guessing and then everybody's going to one place, but the finance director knows where he's going, the driver knows where he's going, the other technician knows where they're going. So like it's optimized for every user base.
Yeah. And exactly that. And this is something that's come out of software historically for years and years and years. Make sure that your software is configurable to the extent that you can have it role based. Because,
Right.
somebody whose their responsibility is checking invoices and then sending those invoices out to their customer. They don't want to see all of the jobs that are being created. They don't necessarily want to see all the quotes that are being made. They don't really need to see the list of customers. And they probably don't need to see the list of users on the system. So give them access to the things that are needed for them, declutters the screen, gives them, a very simple navigation from one point to the other. And then conversely, exactly the same with the finance director. All he wants to know about is the numbers. Give him the ability to see a dashboard with all the numbers on it. Give him the ability to get at the reports, to download reports and see, the value that the business is making on a daily basis or monthly basis. They don't want to see the minute detail. They don't want to see the vehicle defect reports. They don't, they might want to, but they don't need to. So make it applicable to the user and make sure that you've got that ability to switch, what they see based on their role really, really easy, and allow people to set those up themselves. That's important. Yeah.
That's insightful. Make the software configurable to the role of the different personalities in the company.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
you've talked about culture. You talk about, the principles that are non-negotiable. Talk about, the different things that you need to do. Inbound calls, either inbound reach for customers, getting in front of the customers and stuff. But so for the listeners listening, for those building lean companies to compete globally, what metrics tells you that you are actually building a good software? You're actually on the path of building a good software aside beyond revenue. What other metrics do you think?
Beyond revenue is a tough one because, obviously you're making sales. Great, fantastic. But then companies make sales selling rubbish software. We all know that. And, I'm not going to mention any of them, but there is a lot of them out there. I think that the thing is, and I go back to the very first thing that we talked about, which is actually getting in front of people. If you're competing against, another software company that's probably more established than you, is bigger than you, if you're competing and the feedback you get when you demonstrate your product and show how it works proves to you that you're doing it right. Because 9 times out of 10, people will look at our software and say, that looks good. I love the way it works. I love this. I love that. It's really nice. It's really modern. It's really fresh. And that tells you you're doing a good job. And that kind of comment is the best comment you can get. If you're not going to win them as a business, as a customer, somebody saying it's great. What you've got here is fantastic. It might not be for us, but what you've done is really, really good. So for me, that tells me we're doing a good job. I think the second part of that is where I see improvements in velocity of us taking requirements and turning those into functional technology. And that I always equate that to velocity because that's the term you use in software development. But in a way, it was velocity was always applied to a developer or a project and say, well, what's the speed? How many story points are we doing today? How many story points is this going to take? I think we apply that across the business as a velocity. How quickly can we get a customer requirement in to, design it, build it, send it to the developers, get it back from the developers, test it, deploy it. How quick can we do that? And sometimes we challenge ourselves to see how quickly we can do it. And I think if somebody says, well, it's really good, but if it doesn't do that, we're not interested. Yeah, we'll have that for you next week. How? Well,
Wow.
because we can, because we can do that, and we've had a lot of situations where, customers have said to us, look, we need to be going live next month, but we're not sure you're going to have all this ready. And we'll go hammer and tongs to get it ready. But we've got, that speed and agility built in right the way through the business. We react, we're quick, we're fast, and we know how to get stuff done. And I think that, that's really important because that proves to people that actually, and it's very different with a large software company. They take quite a long time to develop things and release things. So you're looking, we're sort of very, very agile. We're very fast. We're very design orientated. We're very, quick to change the way things work and the way things look and feel. And we can do that because we're small. It's like the difference between a mouse and an elephant. A mouse can turn on a sixpence, an elephant take a little bit, bigger to turn around. And that's great, and that you're doing well when you've got these big companies that are signing up for your software. Revenue aside, companies that you'd never believe would be a customer of yours become a customer of yours. And as we've got Motorola. We always say Motorola, but Motorola, everybody knows Motorola. They're a customer of ours, and
Wow.
we're selling them a software which manages their field workforce. So that's quite a key component of what they do, and that's for me that says we're doing a good job. Yeah.
I like that. I like
Maybe
that.
bleep out that corporate name that I said because they do get quite funny when you mention.
I like that. So let's give something back to the small or the upcoming software developer, the starters, the startup founders. For those startup founders that are listening, what is the one workflow they should digitize first to get a quick win?
I think the quick win is make sure the foundations you're building for your technology is scalable. Yeah. Reliable, resilient, scalable. Don't build your architecture to support one customer. Build your architecture to support 1,000 customers. And obviously you have to be quite careful that you're not spending a huge amount of money doing that. But bear that in mind, because what you don't want is poor foundations for a platform that's doing 20,000 transactions a minute. You can't. It's very difficult to go and fix that. So quick win is get somebody in who knows how to build a scalable, secure, reliable, modern architecture. And that headache goes away for the future. It doesn't exist. So we add another customer. It's easy. We spin up another environment. It's easy. We don't have to worry about it. It's creaking. And my analogy, I use a lot of analogies. I haven't used many today, but I always think when people talk about that, it's, you put down a base for a shed in your garden, and then before you know it, you've got a block of flats on it. It's going to fall down. It's going to sink into the ground. Build good foundations in your back end architecture. And that's a very, it's not necessarily a quick win, but it will save you a lot of trouble in the future. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's very valuable. So where can people learn about Fizarra if they want to, if customer want to reach out, how they reach out, what can they learn, and how do they get in touch with Fizarra?
They can look at our website, obviously. We've simplified it a lot. It's very focused. It's like a funnel. If there's something in there that meets your requirements, it will drive you to hit that book a demo button. You can search for us on the internet. You can contact us, if you want to find out more about how we operate, not necessarily about our products, but if you want any advice on how we work, then that's fine. Yeah, ask any of our customers, find out about Fizarra. We've got, there's a lot of information about Fizarra on the internet. We're very heavily into LinkedIn because that's where most of our customers hang out. They're not TikTok. people. They're not necessarily Facebook people, not necessarily Instagram people, but businesses, B2B sales, a lot of activity happens on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of information on our LinkedIn pages about our products and what we do. Yeah, that's it. I haven't written any books, so I can't suggest read my book, but maybe when I retire, I'll write a book.
I'll be waiting for a copy of that book. And I think everybody will be waiting. That's quite insightful. You've given us a lot today. Your final words to the audience and to everyone in the software community.
Yeah, I would say if you're starting out with a software business, find something unique. Or if you're starting out with a tech business, try and find something unique. It's very, very difficult. Somebody's probably done it before. But if you think you can do it better, take the risk and have a go. Do your market research. Really study who's going to buy this and why, and what you can do that's going to benefit them over and above what's currently available. And don't cut any code before you've done your market research. Look at whether your product would sell. And also, I think the other thing is, don't think it's going to happen overnight. I thought it was going to happen overnight. I was a bit green when I started the business, and I thought, well, in a couple of years' time, I'll be rich and, I won't have to worry about anything. But actually, it takes a long time. And somebody did say to me, the companies that you see, overnight successes, they've generally got 10 years of trading behind them. And I think that's true. You put a lot of effort in, stick with it, take risks, not financially, take risks technically. You'll make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and you'll get there eventually. And a really, 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 really important thing that I need to say is, and I've heard people say it before, but employ people that are smarter than you, and let them use their brains. Don't stifle them. Help them. Give them authority. Make sure they're much better at what they're going to do than you'll ever be. And if you do that, you'll end up with a really good team and a really good culture. And respect everybody. That's the other thing. Respect everybody in your business and everybody in the customers that you're working with. That's really important. So that's my final words.
Wow. So market research, employ people that are smarter than you, have patience, take time to build, take risk when necessary, not financial, not just any financial risk like that, but the good risk, and they respect everybody. Those are powerful words. Those are powerful words. And I like that. I've personally benefited and enjoyed this conversation with you. And thank you very much, Jon. So today has been a chat with Jon from Fizarra. So Fizarra is Fizarra.com. So if you go onto their website, you see Fizarra.com. You go products on waste management software, mobile workforce management software, waste brokerage software as well. So Jon has been speaking to us on a topic called how to build a good software company to compete with big companies globally. So Jon Holttum, COO and founder of Fizarra, thank you very much for today, for your insight.
You're welcome, man.
Okay. And for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe. If you have any questions for Jon, you can reach them at their website directly. You can also contact them on LinkedIn, like you mentioned, or you can leave a comment in the comment box, and definitely they'll look at it and respond where needed. So we're going to have another discussion at some point. So make sure you stay tuned and follow our page and everywhere. And you're going to obviously have the kind of insight as we share with you every time. Thank you once again, Jon, and I'll speak to you some other time. And all the best with Fizarra, and thank you for the good work that you are doing for the community.
Okay.
Thank you.